again to the government, they'll have control completely of you and your life. So that's what's the dangerous part is, and people still haven't got their head around the fact that that could happen. It's already happening in the monetary system with your phones because your card's on your phone now. So it's all centralised. Even the MyGov app that's on the phone for the government's health department has you on there as well. I mean, even to the point where they run ads on telly, the government saying, can you please give us your DNA via your bowel tests, your bowel cancer tests, you know? I mean, because if you haven't got bowel cancer, they've got your DNA because you just sent them a copy of it and they just store it away and go, thank you. So, you know, to me, the system is geared up for this complete and utter surveillance system, which will be plugged into the Internet of Things and the 5G when it actually comes, the real 5G, in real time, very fast time. And a lot of people are signing up for all these things, and they just don't understand that this is what you're giving up, which is your privacy and your individualism and your right to disconnect. I mean, that's even on the news now about trying to stop your boss from ringing you while you're at home in your own leisure time. They just keep you hooked up 24/7 because that's the idea of working from home and being contactable. Well, there's now a new law coming into Australia with the right to disconnect, where the boss can't contact you out of hours, and that you could put them up to the Fair Work Ombudsman and they can be fined. I mean, of course, you won't have a job after that, but this is how far it's come, okay? And remember, the pandemic really created the work from home thing. So you can understand this is all part of agenda to move everyone very quickly to QR coding and using the Planet of the Apps phones. That's what I call it, the Planet of the Apps, because that's where you're headed. And most people cannot stop staring at their device 24/7. And it's now become the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is I always thought it was. It's like the black rectangular shape that's in that movie way back then when Arthur C. Clarke wrote the book, and then the movie came out with Stanley Kubrick. That's also part of the moon landing theory where he was roped in to do the fake moon landing so that the US could beat Russia as the first ones to set foot on the moon and occupy it and stick the flag in the ground and say we own the moon. Well, they never went back, did they, people? So it's going to be interesting to see. They never went back, I mean, recently to build the bases and all the things they said. It just seems to be a very strange anomaly. And people will argue that moon landing stuff left, right and centre. And there were a lot of arguments to say it was faked. But there were a lot of arguments to say and debunks of some of the stuff that was put up to say that it was fake. So you got to look at, it's like, it reminds me of Eric von Däniken. This is the guy that wrote The Chariot of the Gods, if anyone can remember that book, where he found, or supposedly found, alien artefacts on Earth. And then, of course, as people believed it, as it got further down the track, he was actually blamed for digging up artefacts that he buried himself to claim that they were from the past. And he got caught. And then he was debunked. That was the end of him. You only have to make one mistake, and all the good work you did before is thrown out the window. And you have to start again with a massive tinfoil on your head. And that's what's happening. And they're trying to catch people out. They caught Alex Jones out with Sandy Hook, and it just about destroyed his career. It still has, really. And apparently he's touring the world with Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand. And I would go to that if they came to Australia, but apparently they're not coming to Australia. So I'm thinking that's such a shame, because Australia was one of the most locked down places on the planet, and we really need to be exposed to this stuff to keep us thinking. You know, it's not about conspiracy theory or conspiracy fact or conspiracy anything. Remember, the word conspiracy came from the FBI after JFK was shot and assassinated. That's when they started saying that people gathering together to whisper were conspiring. That's where it came from. So we need to debunk the word conspiracy and bring it back to the fact that people just want the truth. Like the X-Files used to say, the truth is out there, okay? We need to be able to be allowed to think along those lines and not told we can't. Now, just to finish up about the Observatory Hill in Sydney, where they had the original meteorological readings for the weather, rainfall and temperature. What I meant to say before, when they cut the records out, this goes back to old articles I put up years ago, which showed that up to a certain point in time, around the 1900s, they used to do a reading from the thermometer on top of the hill, Observatory Hill in Sydney. It's a main area. There's a lot of history to it. but they used to have the readings there because it was higher up. Anyway, what's happened, they had to move the thermometer simply because a particular fellow who's high up in the politics there, it wasn't the governor, but it was someone close to it, to do with the meteorological, that whole area there was a house. And this fellow wanted to move his family into it. So they had to move the thermometer another 150 metres away from its original spot. Now, where they moved it to was a spot that was sheltered and gave different readings from when it was on top of the hill. So this is why the correct readings were on top of the hill, and a lot of those older records still stand, what I mentioned last week. So this is what I'm saying. And so they cherry pick. And what's happened is they have cut the data out for Observatory Hill from 2017, 2024, and they've left data in at other weather stations. But that's the one they used to refer to because it was the main weather station, the main place where they always used to take the readings from. So that's what I'm saying. It's sort of like, it depends on where the press tube media is getting their readings from. So in other words, the readings from Observatory Hill now, because it's a different spot since the 1900s, is a different reading because of where it is. Okay, not the fact that they just moved it. They put it in a spot where it's got less chance of being cold. It's got its own micro weather just where it is, its own temperature and everything, which is not what they should be doing. Apparently they also moved it because, not just because the fellow and his family moved into the residence that was on that hill, but also because the city was growing and it was getting lights, and it was sort of, that's a really bad thing for observatories. They need clear skies and no lights to affect it. So it's sort of lost its ability, but still they use it as one of the main data for the weather reporting. But there are many other ones, so you can choose other ones. There is ways to look at the data still, but I suppose the main point I'm really trying to make is it's not accurate to what it should be. And we are basing everything we do now with our energy and everything on those figures. That's what I'm trying to say. So worldwide, this could be happening on the same situation, where it depends on where the main thermometers are getting their readings from. Where are they? If they've been moved, why? And if the readings have changed, they need to be adjusted for that. People need to know. But so it's just a blind thing we're doing here. We're just trusting the readings from the government and thinking that the world's going to be 2 degrees warmer and we're all going to fry. And so we must close down all our coal-fired power stations, or anything that's affecting the Earth's temperature must be observed and monitored. So the reason I'm mentioning this too is because they're running headlong into it. There's no slow transition. You see, this is the big deal. They want to get out of the internal combustion engine, stop using oil immediately and gas, and go straight to renewables and batteries. In other words, get rid of one problem and create another one. It doesn't really solve the global warming thing. It appears to, because you don't see smoke coming out of the back of a car or anything like that. So it appears to be doing the right thing. I mean, for instance, just on a very simple example to do with lithium batteries, I've got like one of those Sony earbuds, you know, because, you know, they took away the 1/4 inch or whatever it is, the mini jack. They took the mini jack out of the iPhone, so you're forced onto these wireless ones, which I'm not happy about, but I have to do it. I'm like everybody else. I can't go back to the old form factors because they keep changing them. Anyway, the point I'm making is that sometimes I forget to take them out of the pocket of the pants and the pants get washed. And what do you think happens to a lithium battery when it gets wet? It doesn't work anymore. So I'm just saying that this is another thing. Is the casing on those lithium batteries in cars, and they're 1 ton, needs to be absolutely watertight. Because you know yourself, you've driven through puddles. You know when there's a flood somewhere and you've driven the car straight through it. And so they do make them watertight. That's the plan for the lithium battery. But at the same time, there are unforeseen problems coming to do with the new way we want to do things, okay? To do with anything from throwing lithium batteries out and they get caught up in the trash trucks or the garbage trucks that take them, and then when they get compacted, they explode because of the heat. That's another thing. You can't pierce them. So, you know, everyone could argue the point, well, petrol engines burn because you throw a match on them, they explode, just like in the Hollywood movies, which is a load of BS. They don't actually explode. But hey, 2 lithium battery cars head on might and create a massive explosion. I haven't seen it yet, but if it does happen, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? This is all the difference in replacing one thing with another to make it better, when in actual fact it may not make it better and cause a whole world of hurt to people that can't get enough energy for their house anymore. Now, I'm telling you people, this is by design. They're not stupid. They're not just doing this, they're making people think that there is a global emergency, just like the pandemic with coronavirus, and that if you don't do what they say, terrible things are coming. Okay, and so people just do it. So this is the same thing again. It's part of the agenda. Okay, same way they're harping on about monkeypox now and bird flu and anything they can get their hands on, they're saying it simply to keep people in that mode of fear. I still hear the sirens going up and down the main road near where I am all the time, constantly, for no reason, at all times of the night. Doesn't matter whether it's fire engines and police or ambulances, it's just up and down the main road constantly. And I had a friend say to me, yeah, I followed one of the police cars. And I said, oh, that's great. Where did it go? He said, it just chucked a U. He went back and started putting the siren on again. And I said, that's ridiculous. I said, well, why are they doing that? And we could only come to the conclusion that it's to keep that fear. They've been told to make sure the public knows the police are there. So they switch on the siren at all hours of the morning, and you wake up and go, well, thank God the police are there. And now I've got to try and get back to sleep because it's going to come back again the other way. Anyway, and just to put the whole thing to rest, this comment was done nearly 10 years ago, or it was more than 10 years ago now, and it was to an article that I put out, would have been 10 years ago as well. The article was called "The Hot Air Continues to Rise from the BOM, Bureau of Meteorology." 6th of December 2015, people. And they did reporting. That particular article was just about how the phones where we've got our weather data, which usually doesn't always come from the bomb, because that one I'm looking at now is on the Apple phone, which is Yahoo, is different from the reporting from the Australian government, where the actual Bureau of Meteorology, none of the weather reports match because they're all over the place, but a lot of people do take their readings from the bomb anyway. So my point was in the article, that one was that none of the statistics you look at match, so we didn't know who was actually telling the truth. And then I've put in a comment. There's been a comment added at the bottom, which it sums it up, people. This is back in the day when Prime Minister Tony Abbott, was trying to investigate the Bureau of Meteorology more than 10 years ago. So it's got abc.net.au, and it's got the government discussed the BOM investigation over climate change. So this is when all the climate change stuff was starting to really take hold and people were starting to use the word climate change as opposed to global warming, which is what it originally was. And this comment is pretty good. This is in 2015. I don't know who the fellow is, but I just thought words of wisdom are worth saving. So they've been copy and pasted in there. So it says here, and I've replied, brilliant comment to this article. And it says, quote, there are quite a few reputable climate scientists that have questioned the methodology of the BOM. After all, Abbott wanted to do was check that the BOM was producing reliable comment based on accurate science. And it says, I think the left-wing comments on this ABC page ought to face up to the reality that those of us on the right have a different take on the Labor Party's policy on climate change. This hysterical reaction by many on the left of politics is laughable. How many of you are scientists? How many believe that Flannery, this is Tim Flannery back in the day, is a scientist or a good scientist? He's the one that said all the dams would evaporate and we'd have no water in Sydney. It's like ridiculous. And it says, and why does the left-wing media fail, even refuse to debate or report the other side? Same with what's happening now with Trump and Harris people. You can see that one side never lets the other side speak. And it says, why is it that scientists such as Dr. Jennifer Marahasi, as I reported on last week, Joe Nova, Professor Bob Carter, or even the old bearded TV guru Professor David Bellamy are never debated on the ABC? And it says, and how many of you think that Senator Wong's, and this is Penny Wong now, this is the one that's actually the defence minister. This is how they move up the ranks, people. And it says, and how many of you think that Senator Wong's oft-quoted statement that 97% of the world's climate scientists believe in climate change, and he says, is a scientific claim, with a question mark. How many have believed that the United Nations ought to create a new world government to redistribute the wealth from the world's advanced or first world economies to the third world countries? Well, I just want to reply to that comment from Jeffrey Kelly, apparently the fellow's name is, back in 2015. So the reason I was mentioning this is that the New World Order, their plan is not to take wealth from the first world and give it to the third. Their plan is to take the wealth completely themselves and actually whittle down the first class to the third class. So there is no, or third world, I should say, not class. So there is no challenge to them. It's a bit like the way some countries in like South America, like say Brazil with Rio de Janeiro, they have a poor society, no middle class, and very rich. None in between. Same thing's happening in Chile, Argentina, all these countries where there's no real middle class. They're just very rich or very poor. There's not much of a middle class. So that's what the globalists want. They want the same setup, where there's a minimal amount of the richest and a maximum amount of the third world. And then they can control them and cull them, feed them what they want, do what they want to them. That's it. Educate them the way they want, do everything that they want. There's no more picking and choosing or voting. That's what they're trying to do. That's exactly where we're headed. So voting will mean nothing in the future. You'll be voting for, like what the communists do, you vote for one party. There's nothing else to vote for. You have an election and all you do is reinstate the same people again. I mean, ridiculous. Anyway, I will put up that weather data. I haven't put it up yet, but I'll put it all up and you can sort of look at the fact that they have stopped the readings from the Sydney Observatory from 2007 and 2024, and you can still get readings from all other weather stations. So you should do that. If you're in a certain area, don't look at the main one in Sydney, which they are. Look at the one that's closest to you, because there's all different ones all over Australia, and you can probably access them and look at the data and see how far back it goes. And if you've got more reliable data from that weather station, you should be trying to take your information from that. It's very hard because all the phones and everything, all the apps are sort of just taking them from one source. And I remember having this problem with the Weather Channel years ago, and I think the fellow that owned it sold it, and it suddenly became, I think it's still globalist control, but let me just have a look, one sec. Yeah, I'm on the Wikipedia and nothing's changed. In 2016, it says it reports service at the Sinclair Broadcast Group had expressed interest in acquiring ownership of the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel's huge, people. It says on March the 22nd, this is just prior to the pandemic, 2018, Byron Allen's Entertainment Studios announced its acquisition of the Weather Channel's television assets from the NBC Universal / Bain, remember them people, / Blackstone. So there you go. These are giant, like Blackstone, it's a big giant conglomerate, like company. Same with Bain, I reported on a few weeks back, that was also sitting on the board of something, and they also have all the the Black Rocks and the Vanguards. It's all the same mob, you could say. So then it says here, in the early morning of the April the 18th, 2019, the Weather Channel was temporarily unavailable to air live programming due to what they called a malicious software attack on their network. Isn't that interesting? It's always an inside job, people. It's not Russian hackers. It's got previously taped shows were aired while engineers worked with backup equipment. So everything can get hacked, even the weather. And live programming returned to normal within a few hours. It says the perpetrators of the malware attack were never identified. It's an inside job, people. It says on May 2022, so we're in the pandemic, on the Weather Channel's 40th birthday, it launched a new direct-to-consumer subscription-based app. In August 2023, IBM announced it would be selling its Weather Union and the Weather Unit, and the Weather Channel's subsidiaries and apps to the Francisco partners. As a part of the deal, IBM will retain the company's weather data. Oh yeah, of course it does, which it uses to power artificial intelligence models to sell its enterprise clients for NASA. So see how these weather reporting things are shared around between AI and NASA. And then you get NASA saying, well, the weather's this, and they really just got it from the app, from the Weather Channel. Makes you laugh, but you got to know this stuff, people, because otherwise, where are you getting your news from? Where did it originally come from? So it's got, over the years, attempts to broadcast international versions of the Weather Channel apart from the Australian version of the Weather Channel, now Sky News Weather Channel. So there you go, have failed. The Weather Channel operates websites that provide localised forecasts in Brazil, France, Germany, India, Latin America, and the UK. But some of these sites may have not have developed since 2003. That's the reporting from that point. The Weather Channel shares radar imagery and forecasts with the Weather Network in Canada, particularly for the Weather Channel's Canadian broadcast. So see how they're joined. And you've got to find out, where is all this information for the weather coming? It's not even about the scientists, it's about the actual data. Then the scientists interpret it, you see, depending on what they're given. Anyway, let's see who's running it now and see if it's still Globalist run, and then we'll move on. And just so you know how widespread this Weather Channel is, it's used, it's maintained on apps for the iPhone, the iPad, Android, Apple TV, Kindle Fire, and Windows Mobile and tablet platforms. So you can see how the overreach is and where they all get their information from this one source. And ironically, people, you know who owns the Weather Channel now, where all those apps tell you about how the weather's going? It's a multi-millionaire called Byron Allen. He's a stand-up comedian way back in the days of David Letterman and Jay Leno starting out, became a media mogul and bought the Weather Channel. I'll just see if I can get the date. And so he owns the Weather Channel. It's privately owned. It was in the hands of globalists just before that, but he grabbed it in the Allen Media Group. They're the ones that actually own the Weather Channel, which is actually this Byron Allen. He's an African-American comedian, stand-up comedian, and he now owns the weather. Now, whether he's aligned to globalists, who knows? But he's a multi-millionaire, worth about $800 million. So who knows, people? But there you go. That's what's happened with the weather. So I prefer to actually get the weather from a weather station that's near where I am and try and make sense of it that way. And also just judge it yourself. When they tell you it's they say it's 22 degrees, say, in Sydney, which is sort of normal, but feels like 26. I mean, I can't stand all that. I don't understand why they say that. But it's almost like the readings they're trying to make up for readings in different areas that are different to try and keep it credible. Who knows? You know, because if you go outside, you know what the weather is, all right? So just take note of that, and other people should too in different areas, and work out the truth from what you actually can see and hear yourself.